today's speaker. I'll be talking about transitioning from AngularJS to Angular, and we'll just see a series of processes and steps that will follow to make the work easier. And I'm going to introduce myself first. I'm Dianah Amimo. I'm a software developer at Food for the Hungry International. It's an NGO, but I'm based here in Kenya, working globally and coordinating development for all the regions and different countries. And I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya. So for the sake of saving data, I think I'm going to switch off my video, then I'll share my slides. Just let me know if you're able to see them so that we can continue. Are you able to see?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So migration from AngularJS to Angular, it's not necessarily Angular 8. It can be any version from Angular 2 onwards. I've seen the current version is up to 10, if I'm not wrong. Yeah. So maybe just by the show of hands or just to get to know, how many have worked with AngularJS before? Can just unmute and say. No one? Okay, so in case you were working in a company and the application is currently built with AngularJS and you're thinking, okay, why do I need to migrate from AngularJS to Angular 8? From now, I'll just refer to Angular versions higher than 2 as Angular for ease of, for convenience. So why do we need to migrate? One is to improve efficiency and effectiveness. Also, AngularJS is currently on long-term support up until June 30th, 2021. After that time, Google will no longer maintain the library. So that's also a major reason as to why if you're developing your app in AngularJS, you need to migrate to Angular. And also, there are many differences between AngularJS and Angular. One of them is architecture. AngularJS uses MVC while Angular uses component-based. For language, AngularJS uses JavaScript, Angular uses TypeScript, and TypeScript is the currently adapted kind of JS. It's just a superset of JavaScript. And when it comes to the application, AngularJS, it handles simple page applications, but Angular is suited for bigger applications. Then AngularJS manipulates the DOM statically, while Angular manipulates it dynamically. For the structure, Angular is better and easy to create, and it's also fast. For data binding, it allows property event templates, binding and interpolation, while AngularJS only allows two-way binding. And Angular supports the CLI tool, which comes in handy while creating the components, the services, and all that. But for AngularJS, we have to incorporate third-party tools. When it comes to dependency injection, AngularJS doesn't use that. But in Angular, we see that you can use dependency injection in our system. And then it also supports reactive programming, mobile support, and it also has material design. So when you're migrating, there are key things that you need to consider. For instance, how you plan on working on your migration, which approach should you take, where should you start from, and which approach should you take, where should you start from. We have two approaches. There's one that is phased migration, which is hybrid. We also have clean slate approach, which means you'll have to do a code rewrite. So we'll just take a dive into these approaches and see which is convenient and which is easier. For the first migration, we dual boot our application. That is, you are able to run AngularJS and Angular concurrently, and your application will still work fine, even with features written in AngularJS and other features written in Angular. Then the migration process is less hectic, as the migration can be done in phases. You can choose to do the migration module by module, and there's also no code freezing because you can develop new features in Angular, and you can do bug fixes and maintenance still in AngularJS as you migrate the components in phases. For the clean slate approach, that means you're starting a new Angular application. It's simply copying the AngularJS code by transforming it to Angular. So you have to start everything from scratch, and you cannot do it fast, and it can be hectic depending on the application size. This approach is recommended if you're having a small application, because it won't take a lot of resources and effort to just do a rewrite. But if you're working with a bigger application that has like close to 10 modules and above, then it might be hectic. And also it will require you to freeze the code. That's unavoidable because you cannot do a rewrite and continue working with AngularJS code. It won't be supported in the newly created Angular application. So having considered this, I'm assuming we are working on migrating an application that is bigger. So we'll take the first approach, which is a hybrid one. And we'll just dive in and see the pros and the cons of that approach so that we are sure on what we are getting ourselves into. For the pros, it's officially supported by Angular through the NG upgrade. That's the official way, that's recommended. So that's a pro. It's also a fast upgrade, hence less pressure, because you can develop new features in Angular and continue upgrading the previous ones and still run AngularJS in the process. Then there's faster change detection. When you're migrating from AngularJS, it's easy for you to understand what are the changes, what's different from AngularJS that Angular is doing. Why did they have to build higher versions besides AngularJS? You're able to get a clear scope of all that. And for the cons of the hybrid approach, the development environment and build tools must be reviewed. For instance, if you are using tools like Gulp and Grant, you might have to review and incorporate Webpack and NPM and all that. And then the adaptation is also a con. You must be willing to learn the upgrade process and the new language in general, which is kind of a must. And the application gets heavier because you're running AngularJS and Angular, and that will continue being heavy until you're done with the entire conversion, where you can now get rid. And now we can take a dive into the first migration with dual booting. There are several things that we must take into consideration before migration, and we are going to take a look at the steps that we can follow to ready our application for the migration process. One of the steps is single responsibility principle. That's just a principle that states that every file should have one component, and it should do one thing, committed to doing only one task. And also, when it comes to code quality, it's recommended to be less than 400 lines of code. So we need to ask ourselves, is our current application compliant to single responsibility principle? So this is an example of an uncompliant code. We have the module, the controller, and the controller has its methods. Then there's a continuation. We also have another controller. So you have one file and it has several controllers. For the first controller, it's the stock create controller, and it also has the stock edit controller, which has its methods also. So for this one, it's not it's non-compliant to the single responsibility principle. How do we go about that? We need to make it compliant. And to make it compliant, we need to separate the code it's a separation of the concerns. So we'll go ahead and create a folder, just name it controllers, and then create a file. You name it stock create controller.js. Then we move the stock create controller code into that file. And we repeat the process with the other controllers, and then we can update the index.html file. And this is a sample of the compliant code now. We have been able to extract the code into stock create controller. And we should also repeat the same for the stock edit controller. So there are two different files. One handles the creation and another one handles the editing. Now we have separated our concerns. You'll repeat the same process for all the files that do not comply to the SR policy. After that, now we move on to evaluate and see what tools are we using. So if you're using Gulp, if you're using Grant, you might find, and if you're using Bower for the package management, you might find it hard to cope up with the new version of Angular. So we need to make our application ready. So we introduce NPM, we introduce TypeScript, we introduce Webpack, and then we edit the configuration files to make sure that our application is able to run. And you must have in mind that when you're doing these steps, you have to keep checking and ensuring that the application is running well, because nothing should break up until this point. Once you've introduced your tools, you can now upgrade to the latest AngularJS version, still AngularJS. Migration will be easier with the latest version of AngularJS. The minimum recommended version is 1.5 because it introduced components to AngularJS ecosystem. So if you're running an AngularJS app that is lower than 1.5, then you'll need to upgrade preferably to up to 1.5. Once you upgrade, you'll have to make your code compliant to the standards of that version, and that will be closer now to the Angular migration. Once you're done with that, we go to a step we call Componentify. This is just a step where we get to convert our controllers and directives to components. And that will make us a step closer when it comes to migrating our components to Angular. And I'll just show an example of a controller that we will transform to a component. Here we have a stock edit controller. It has these two methods, save and remove. And now we want to convert it into a component. You just note the differences that it has. Instead of using the controller now, we get to define let. We have the stock edit component, we have the selector, we have our inline template here, and then we have the controller. We define all the methods and everything inside the controller. We have the save and we have the remove. Now here we'll have dot component, and we pass the component there and the selector, just as we defined in this place. We are passing the selector, we are passing the component. Now we've componentified our controller. We've moved from the controller version now to the component. Once we are done with componentifying, you'll repeat the same process for all the files that are in controllers or even directives. You convert them to component form. Once you're done with that, we move to modernizing our application. And what does this entail? It just entails modifying code so that it complies to TypeScript or ES6 standards. And just to point out a few things, we have replacing some keywords like var, we replace with let. we have the callback. Instead of using the function keyword, we can use the fat arrows, and then we can modify the angular.forEach to the ES6 for loop, and we can introduce this keyword instead of using scope to refer to the current class. That's just an overview of what modernizing entails. Once this is now a modernized component, the stock edit component, we have modernized it. You can see we are using this keyword. We are declaring our variables, public, private. Also, instead of the function, we are using .then. Inside .then, we're using the fat arrow instead of function, as it was before here. Instead of function, we are using the arrows. So that's what modernizing entails. You just go through your code and modernize all the sections. If you had used the var keyword, you replace with let. Once you're done with the modernization, and this just entails introducing the Angular 8 or a higher version into your application. Then you add the dependencies to your package.json. You run npm install to get the dependencies installed, and then you create a polyfills.ts file. The polyfills just provide older browsers compatibility. Once you're done with that, you've been able to integrate the Angular into your AngularJS application, but you're still not done. So you remove the ng-app directive. For AngularJS, it uses the ng-app directive for it to render the application. So you remove it from the index.html file, and then you bootstrap the application by adding the following code into your entry file. So to your entry file, you just pick this code and you add it there. And this is an ng module. We have the browser module, upgrade module. Those are just imports. And here at the export class app module, we're overriding the Angular bootstrap so that it doesn't do anything. And for the bootstrap, we bootstrap using the upgrade module. And this is the code that does that. So instead of where we remove the ng app, now we are declaring it here, the e-commerce. We are declaring now we are declaring it here, the e-commerce inside the body. Once we do this, your application should be at a point where it's running. You should be able to see the console logged message booting in hybrid mode with Angular and AngularJS. Once you see that, it means you've done everything correctly and your application should just work fine. Though from experience, sometimes you'd find that there are little breakages, and these breakages mostly come from third parties. You find a third-party package that was being supported in AngularJS, but once you introduce the dual booting, it might not work properly. So sometimes you'll have to fix the few errors, then everything should just be fine. If you're able to see this message, then you're okay and you're set to go. You've been able to successfully run the two applications together. Once you're done with that, now we migrate our component, and that is just to convert our AngularJS component to Angular. Remember, we had componentified our controller, like from controller to components, but now we want to migrate it from the AngularJS component to Angular components. And below is an example of a migrated component. So for the component migration, now here we are able to use the Angular syntax because we've introduced Angular into our application, and now we are just migrating. It should be able to run because we are dual booting the application. Here we import the Angular first. and then we import the dependencies. You can see here we have the at component declaration here, the selector, and we pass it the template URL. And we have export class, stock edit component, and we have the contents. And also where we discussed on the differences between AngularJS and Angular, we can see that now we are able to use dependency injection in our constructor. And when we use this, then we eliminate the need of having to repeat saying that this dot state is equals to state. So you just inject and it will do that on its own. That's a sample of our component migration. Once you're done, the methods remain the same, nothing changes. We had already complied to ES6 standards, so that's easier. Now you see why we were preparing the application before the actual migration, because the only thing that we've done now is just to introduce the component syntax, the export class and the dependency injection, but every other thing remains the same. So up to this point, we've been able to incorporate the Angular component syntax. Once we are done with the component migration, that's basically it, because you'll just repeat the same for all your files that you have, and then you'll get to migrate the routing, where you switch from UI router to the Angular router, and your routing should work fine. Once you're done with everything and the routing is working okay, you are able now to remove AngularJS. And up to this point, yes, you've been able to migration. And once you do away with the AngularJS, your application will be lightweight, as you saw in the con. One of the cons was that the application will be heavier because you're running Angular and AngularJS. But once you're done with the migration, you can now get rid of the AngularJS and you'll be good to go. I don't know if we have any questions I can take.
Oh, okay. You're done?
Yeah, that's it. That's basically the flow.
Wow, amazing, amazing. I was actually just chatting up a friend of mine here, and like I was just being amazed on how AngularJS was so different from the now Angular. So like I was just saying that I never knew that AngularJS had controllers instead of components, and I
Yeah,
was just
it.
wondering,
Mm-hmm.
and then how it never had dependency injection. So how was one even handling HTTP requests? Like, could you be able to like,
Oh,
probably talk about how, for example, the lack of dependency injection was still enabled HTTP requests to be made, or how was it with AngularJS? I personally haven't interacted with AngularJS, so I don't really know about that. So would you like to probably talk more about that part? Yeah.
okay. Actually, mhm. For the dependency injection, no, it wasn't using dependency injection, but you are able to, there's something called, I don't know if I can get a file. Let me search for a file and share just in a few and see. Are you able to see VS Code? Are you seeing VS Code screen?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. So for the dependency injection, this is a sample application. file for which uses now Angular. It's not been upgraded yet, so it's using the controller, as you can see. This is how it was handling dependencies. You have to define them here. Once you define the module, you put the module dependencies. So these are the module dependencies. And then you have to define them. The module dependencies, you define them there. And then you also put the controller dependencies. So in this case, we have scope, root scope, and model, timeout, translate, local storage, and then you define them here. Once you've done that, you can be able to use them in the code. That's how AngularJS handled dependency injection. And for HTTP requests, yeah, it was just working fine. So you can see the difference, like it's way easier in Angular compared to this side. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. I was just interested in how that was happening. Okay. Okay. Anyone else who has a question?
So I have a question. So I don't know if somebody has asked, because I've joined late, but I think it's something that I wanted to ask. So AngularJS support, I think, ends next year, right?
Yes, it's ending next year.
Yeah. So what does that mean in terms to projects that use AngularJS? Also, maybe in terms of like somebody who might consider using AngularJS for the product, should he, like, is it because today I saw Minko is one of the Angular teams rectify somebody on basically an AngularJS and Angular thing. So does it mean that for now AngularJS is just more of a migration experience rather than start a new project with AngularJS?
For now, actually, if I'm getting you right, if you're having an application that's already in AngularJS, you're asking if you have to start all over or what's the way forward for you.
Yeah.
Have I gotten it right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so if that's the case, you have to consider and weigh in if how big is your application. If the application is small, that you can do with a rewrite, which is one of the things we've discussed in the presentation, then you can go ahead and do a clean rewrite, which will be just starting all over again, the development, and transforming your AngularJS code to Angular. But in a case where your application is so big, say 10 or 10 and above modules, then you'll find that it's hard for you to just do an overhaul, to do a rewrite, because rewriting will mean that you need more resources, you need a lot of people, and you need a lot of time dedicated. And it will also mean that you'll have to freeze your application development. So in that case, we prefer doing a phased migration where you bring in Angular to work together with AngularJS so that you can do the migration bit by bit as you do new features in Angular. That way you'll be able to migrate every other thing that was in AngularJS, and eventually you'll be able to run Angular. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Have you been doing AngularJS apps, Kevin?
No. I've never even written a single code of AngularJS.
Then you guys are lucky. I started off doing AngularJS applications for like 2 years.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is it accidental, or you just knew what you were doing?
Let's just say, actually not really, because when you land a job in a company and they're using a certain development stack, you have to follow suit. There's no way you'll just deviate. So at the moment where I used to work, we were using AngularJS. That's how I got to interact.
Yeah, because there's somebody I think who reached back to me sometime while telling me that he has an error in Angular. So it's something that I've never seen. Then after some time is when he told me that he's been following an AngularJS tutorial.
Oh, I see. But for now, if you can recommend to your friends, I wouldn't advise anyone to start a new application in AngularJS. It's better to start in Angular.
Okay. And so how has been your experience working with AngularJS while at the company when you started off?
Oh, actually, when I started off, it was hectic because I started off as an intern. During the internship, I learned Vue.js. But once the internship was over, I was allocated a project that was running on AngularJS. So I had to learn and do. It was quite hectic. I was learning on the need to know basis and just researching. It took a while to get my way around it. But finally, yeah, I got proficient in it. Though after some time, we switched from now AngularJS and started rewriting the application in Vue. More like introduced Vue into AngularJS. So they were running concurrently. Then we were rewriting the AngularJS code in Vue and facing it off.
Okay. And so probably if there's no question, I'll just drop one question. I think that most people, if they're not here, usually have this question of like, is Angular going to die anytime soon? Because people are always like, for example, there's this always technology wars or React, Vue, Angular, and all that. What would you say for like people who think that Angular is gonna die anytime soon?
I don't really think it's going to die anytime soon because from interacting with it, I like the way it is. It uses the classes kind of way and all that. So I don't think really it's going to die. Plus, the support is growing over time, and we are seeing higher versions and newer versions being developed. So if it's dying, then I think it's gonna take a while.
Diana, maybe to also be part of that conversation, I think there's a similar YouTube video that I saw by a guy known as Chris Hawkes. So I think if you go, you can look at that. So I think like many people that talk about Angular dying, they have actually like not worked with Angular that long. Because if you even like if you hear the video, it's something that we really discuss it in the comment section, is even like alternating between AngularJS and Angular and all that. So like you can see like the features that Angular come with. I did React before doing Angular, and then I'm now back to React due to some issues. And I think that for me, I think Angular makes you a better React developer.
So for you, Angular is React higher than Angular? Like Angular prepares you for React?
Like if you do Angular first, then you go to React. Like you see the most like when you do even something like Golang, the blocker now becomes, where do I place things? Why do I do this and this? But when you come from like something like Angular, you know how you are expected your components to communicate and all that. So you can be able to think of how can I in something like state, how can I be able to ensure that my components are well arranged, they can be able to like subscribe to state and all that. Yeah, I think it just makes you prepared to be a very good like an opinionated framework engineer. So another thing is also the issue of like Angular dying out. If you see like a lot of things that Angular is incorporating, like things such as observables and GRX and all that. Okay, observables, and that is a good example. And how do we call it? RxJS. Like, it's something that it's the future of asynchronous JavaScript, but you get it within like Angular. It's more of a must that you do that. So it gives you that good like experience in terms of where JavaScript is headed as a language. So I think that is why I usually say that when you get into talks where people are saying that a certain framework might die out, just listen to their arguments, but like, it's not something that will happen.
Yeah, sure. I support you actually. When we are discussing this, we have to weigh in facts, because sometimes you find that someone is writing an article, will Angular die soon? And then you ask them, have you interacted with Angular? They haven't. They're just basing their knowledge on preference of what they've worked with. But if you've been able to work with React, Vue, and then Angular, you might be in a good position to kind of give a good predictive path for Angular.
Yeah, that's very true. All right. So if there's no other question, I'd like to make a big announcement. So today is Kevin Okundi's birthday. Kevin Okundi is the co-lead of Angular Kenya. I didn't want to tell him that we're gonna do this for him. I think I just ambushed him. So I don't know if you guys can unmute your mic so we can sing like a happy birthday for him. Ivy, Monica, Walter, Brian. If you guys can unmute your mic so that we can sing for him a happy birthday. Oh, okay. So I think Ivy probably is okay. Ivy is there. Monica is unmuted.
I'm here.
Right. Okay. Okay. All right, guys. We could definitely start singing now. Okay. Okay. I'm not sure if there's gonna be some little bit of delay, but okay. Let's just start singing. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kevin. Happy
Happy
birthday
birthday
to you.
How old are you now?
How old, Kevin? Oh, 22. Okay.
22.
Hey, man, you're being old. Just growing old, man. Yeah, anyway, happy birthday, Kevin. We wish you many more and more of God's blessings. Yeah. Anyway, I think someone texted me that then they would like to have your contacts. I think LinkedIn or Twitter. So if you can share it with me, then I'll share it with the whole community. Yeah. I'd like to say a big thank you to all those that came for this session. I really appreciate that you've taken the time to really come and listen to our speaker today, and thank you, Diana, for taking us through this session. I know you've taken it off your busy schedule to just take us through AngularJS. For most of us here, I'm very sure I think almost all of us here have never interacted with AngularJS apart from only you. So it's pretty interesting seeing how AngularJS was, because when we came in as Angular and trying to like Angular enthusiasts, we just we dived right into Angular after we were told like, no, do not touch AngularJS at all. So we never knew what was happening with AngularJS, and we probably, okay, I'll speak for myself. I really did not bother to try and see what AngularJS is all about. But yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. So this session has been recorded, so we'll definitely have the video up on YouTube by tomorrow morning, and I'll be sharing the video with all of you. And Yeah. Oh, sorry. I think someone has a question. Yeah, Monica.
Yeah, so she's okay. I'm trying to remember her name. Amimo, Miss Amimo. Hi.
Yes. Hi.
Thank you for the awesome presentation. I really enjoyed your first slide about the differences. I was so keen, and there's something that I didn't know, and I actually know thanks to you. So, not really a question, but next week there's a project I'll be working on Angular. I don't know how busy are you. Maybe you could help me out by reviewing some codes if you can.
Yeah, sure. I'm
Next week,
glad. I'll be happy
one.
to.
Okay.
Yeah, you just
Mhm.
get in touch with me. I'll give Wayne my contacts.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or I can send you. I don't know how to reach you.
I think when you give it to Wayne, that will work perfectly.
You'll be able to get it right.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Just get in touch, then we'll work together.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. So yeah, thank you guys once again. Happy birthday to you, Kevin. I hope you have a blast tonight. I don't know. I think you're mostly going to be coding, or just take some time off at least today and watch a movie or something, bro. Anyway, thank you guys for coming. Yeah, I'd love to bring the meeting to a close, and I'll share everything, slides, contacts, and everything on our Twitter account, and also I will also upload some of the information, especially with the slides, on the YouTube caption section. Yeah, thank you guys for coming, and yeah, have a good night, all of you.
Thank you. Good night too.